So in this lecture, I want to finish up talking about Sartre. In the last few lectures, we've talked about his views on authenticity and bad faith. Authenticity is facing up to your freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. Bad faith is an attempt to deny this in various ways through self-deception. Um, Last lecture, we looked at Sartre's argument for this, that just if you think about it, no matter what facts you find out about yourself or human beings in general, you still face this choice of what to do with those facts, right? Even if we get great arguments for determinism, we still have to make choices. Even if we are really disturbed by this phenomenon of moral luck, in the cases where moral luck might apply, we still have to make a choice. We find out about moral luck, it doesn't mean suddenly we can just not make choices. We still have to decide, do we speed down the highway? Do we look away for a second? Do we drive drunk? So on and so forth, right? Now, I think there's a legitimate insight in Sartre's conception of freedom and in Sartre's lecture and in some of his other philosophical work. I also think that Sartre overstates his case, and in a way, this misdescribes the human condition and what it is to make free choices. So why is that? Why is it, even if there are legitimate insights in Sartre, I say he goes too far? Well, just very clearly, despite what Sartre says, there are clear limits on freedom. One way that this is so is through culture and history, right? Your culture and the history of your society determines both what choices are available to you and what those choices mean. For instance, no contemporary person can choose to be a knight, right? A knight, these guys on horseback who did battle in medieval Europe. To be a knight, you have to be a member of a very specific society, right? A knight is this person who occupies a social role in medieval Europe. They fight. They are recognized as knights by other knights. They follow this code of honor, or at least they're supposed to. And society as a whole recognizes them for that, right? Same goes for, say, a samurai in ancient Japan, right? Or medieval Japan. They have a certain social role. They're recognized as having that role. They have certain relationships with other people that are determined by being a samurai and also determine what it is to be one. Well, for those reasons, nobody in modern America or modern Japan or wherever could be a knight or a samurai, right? You can dress in armor all you want, ride around, you can even enter joust competitions with people who like to do the same thing. You are not a knight. To be a knight, you would have to occupy a certain role in a very specific society. That society doesn't exist anymore. There are these Renaissance fairs, the Society for Creative Anachronism, so on and so forth. Dress in armor all you want. Call yourself Sir Terry, Sir Jimmy, or whatever. You're not a knight, right? You are a 21st century American in a suit of armor. If you're not a knight, if you're a computer programmer, you are a computer programmer who likes to dress up in a suit of armor. If you are a college professor, you are a college professor who likes to dress up in a suit of armor and pretend to be a knight on weekends, right? You're not a knight, you can't be. You're not a samurai, you can't be, right? That is not a live option in our society. The society, backdrop, the social order you would need to be a samurai or a knight does not exist anymore. So, very clearly, there are certain things just not open to you by virtue of the kind of society you live in. You know, people tend to romanticize the Middle Ages. Obviously, most people in the Middle Ages could never be a knight either, right? If you were a peasant, you are not going to be a knight, right? But whatever. I find romanticizing the Middle Ages completely bizarre. It seems like a really terrible time to be alive in human history, but I will not get into that. Or think about just, more down-to-earth decisions, right? Choosing to join the military means different things at different times, right? Even for an American. In World War II, when the Japanese had started the war by attacking us, when the Germans were committing horrible genocide in Europe, and America was fighting against them, joining the military then means something entirely different than it would during Vietnam, when America's fighting a war against a smaller nation that doesn't seem to directly threaten us, and when there's good reasons to think that the war was declared on a lie, right? Vietnam, there was a claim that the North Vietnamese attacked us in the Gulf of Tonkin. Even President Lyndon Johnson, who was very public about this, said, oh, we've been attacked, we have to do something, privately said, oh yeah, I don't think this happened. I think this was just some guys shooting at some fish, right? Joining the military, or even just if you're drafted, accepting the draft during World War II, to me means something, and I think to anybody else would have to mean something than it would during Vietnam, right? If you are alive during World War II, it seems to me if you're a brave, patriotic person, you should join the military, right? In World War II. If you're drafted, you certainly shouldn't avoid it. That would be an act of cowardice. Not clear to me at all that the same things hold true in Vietnam, right? Not clear to me at all that it's the right thing to do to join the military in this situation for this war, right? Dodging the draft, avoiding the draft means something entirely different during the Vietnam era than it does in World War II, right? It's not obviously an act of cowardice. It could be an act of principle, given the nature of this war. And even in Sartre's day, resisting the Nazis would mean something different for a French person and a German, right? If you're French, these guys are invaders. Not only are the Nazis the picture of evil, they have invaded and occupied your country. It is not just an act of human decency to fight the Nazis. It is an act of patriotism, right? If you're a German, though, and you see Germans, even, especially more conservative Germans, even some who later resisted the Nazis, resisting the Nazis seems like treason, right? You are, even if it's the right thing to do, betraying your country. Claus von Stauffenberg, very heroic guy who tried to kill Hitler, struggled with this, right? He was a more conservative German, and he and his circle that conspired to try to kill Hitler tended to be more conservative elements of German society. They struggle with this of, well, Hitler's a monster. He's drug our country into this war it can't win, and he's made our country do these terrible things. But he is the leader of our country. Isn't it a betrayal of our country in some sense to try to kill him? This is not to say that it was okay for Germans not to resist Hitler, or that resisting Hitler wasn't heroic. It's just to say it was a different thing for them. The choice was a different thing for a German than it was for a French person. Think of other ways too, right? What choices in your family mean are determined by culture, right? In our culture, if your parents were to say, I don't like the person you're going to marry, but don't marry this person, right? Not a problem for me. My parents actually really like my wife. But if your parents said that, I think you'd say, buzz off, it's not your business, right? That wouldn't be an issue. In some cultures, choosing to marry someone against your parents' wishes would be a big deal, right? So, what choices you have available and what those choices mean and what those choices are do seem to depend on your culture and your history. You don't create that. You don't have a choice about that. Sartre seems to want to deny this, right? He has one passage where he talks about different cultures. He uses some un-PC language. Not terrible, but just not, contemporary. But this whole passage just strikes me as really hand-wavy. You know, humans can understand each other because there's a universal human condition and we're all doing the same thing. And I say to myself, I don't know, Sartre. I mean, not following your family's wishes doesn't mean the same thing to me as it would somebody in a more traditional culture. The choice of whether to, in our culture, we don't even have, most of us have a choice between an arranged marriage or choosing our spouse ourselves, right? That's just not a choice. That's not a choice that we even have for most Americans in contemporary culture, right? Or a contemporary French person. That is a choice people in other cultures very much have. Oh, there's a universal human thing. It's the same for Chinese people and Americans and French. Yes, Sartre. I don't know. That goes by in a paragraph. That's really not convincing to me. And there are facts about you as an individual, not just your culture, but you as an individual that limit and determine your freedom. Not only do you have no choice about certain facts, but those facts open up and close off options, right? So one banal sense of this, one rather shallow sense that this is true, most people can't choose to be professional athletes or surgeons, right? If your hands shake, my hands have always shook a little bit, it runs in my family, no one's going to let you be a surgeon, right? If you're 5'3", you're not going to be a professional basketball player. You're not going to be a major league pitcher either, right? I have a friend who only semi-jokingly will talk about how his major league career stalled out because he stopped growing at age, like I think 13 or 14, right? He was a great little league pitcher, a great pitcher on into middle school. He's left-handed, isn't that great? But, after a certain age, he never grows that much. He tops out at I think about 5'7". You are not going to be a pitcher in the major leagues at 5'7", right? This friend of mine, Mike, no matter what he does, cannot choose to be a major league pitcher, right? Just ain't going to happen for him. If you shake, you can't be a surgeon. There's deeper senses of this, though, right? All our evidence is that sexual attraction, both at a personal level And, at a larger level of sexual orientation is largely just a given. I mean, not completely, right? But who you're attracted to, both the sex you're attracted to and what type of person within the sex you're attracted to, is to a large degree just a given. You just are or you aren't attracted to somebody. You can choose if you act on that and how you act on it. You can't just flip a switch, say, I'm not attracted to this person or I am, right? This clearly limits your freedom, right? You can't love someone because you think you should. I think I should fall in love with this person. I see a good argument for it. I will make that choice. No, 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 no. You cannot do that. I'm not saying that love can't be a feeling that develops over time. I think this image of like, oh, love at first sight, or, your soulmate that you just resonate with from the start, I think that's kind of dumb, to be quite blunt. But within certain bounds, if you're just not attracted to somebody, if you just don't feel it, you can't make yourself because you're supposed to, right? And maybe even more regrettably, for some people sometimes, you are attracted to somebody that you shouldn't be. You do love somebody you shouldn't. You can choose to break it off with them. You can choose to avoid them. You can't flip this switch and not feel that, right? Or take Sartre's argument, oh, we all have to choose whether we marry and have children and become a family man and blah, 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 right? In Sartre's time and place, if you were gay, you could not choose to be a happy family man in the way that someone who was heterosexual could, right? You could not, if you're a man, have a relationship with another man openly. If you're a woman, have another relationship with a woman openly, and have children and be a respected, socially accepted family, right? If you wanted the kids and the social acceptance, you would have to marry somebody of the opposite gender, whether you were attracted to them or not, and fake it, right? The heterosexual person has this choice of like, oh, do I stay like the freewheeling bachelor? Do I settle down and have a family? The person who is gay, who does not sexually attracted in the same way, does not have the same choice, right? Do I stay unattached, or do I deny certain facts about myself, marry someone I'm not attracted to, just so I can have children and social respectability? That is not the choice that the heterosexual person faced in Sartre's time. And what would Sartre say about moral luck? Well, I think he would say, even in the face of moral luck, we still have choices, we still have to make them. And I think he'd go further and say, well, people who make choices that turn out badly should take responsibility for them. But that just seems unsatisfying to me. It's like, it just seems honestly like table banging, right? If Sartre says, well, if you make a choice to do something and it turns out badly, you should take responsibility for authenticity, because that's authenticity. Moral luck is an excuse. I don't know. You can say that as loudly as you want, Sartre, or even, literally bang the table. It's true you still have to make choices, but you just seem to be denying and ignoring this whole phenomenon, this whole fact. So what to do with this? Now, as I said, I think Sartre would hate our contemporary pop psychology notion of authenticity, where authenticity is being true to your deep self. But I'm not sure that Sartre's views are ultimately a whole lot more plausible. Sartre seems to think that you just choose who you are with no restrictions. both the deep self view, the pop psych view that Sartre would loathe, that he would hate, that he would get mad about, and Sartre's own radical freedom view, I think get at something true. Part of authenticity is self-knowledge, but another part of authenticity is taking responsibility for your choices. I think both are one-sided and discount each other. I think, I didn't have you guys read Heidegger because he's just an awful, awful writer. There's nothing in Heidegger that's as clear or as fun to read as this Sartre piece. But Heidegger has a notion of authenticity that I think takes this into account. Heidegger will say human beings are, as he puts it, thrown. And what he means by this is that we just find ourselves in a history and a culture we didn't create. And we find many facts about ourselves that we are not responsible for. These facts about our culture and ourselves, and even our own personal histories and biographies, limit and shape our choices and our options. My choice, my options are different than somebody who lives in a radically different culture. They're different from yours. We're both Americans, we both live at the same time. You might be younger than me and you might be older, but even if you were an American my age, my gender, everything else, my race, all of that, you still have a different personal history. All of that determines both what our choices are and what they even mean. But on the other side, even though what our choices are in a sense shaped and determined by things outside of our control, we are still free to decide between the options we have. And we are also free to choose both what our history, our own personal history, and facts about ourselves mean, right? We are even free to choose what our own personal biography means. We can't deny this. We can't pretend, that we aren't a specific person in a specific culture at a specific time, but we do have the freedom to decide what that means for us. Let me put this one way, right? Heidegger would say, I cannot choose not to be an American. Well, you might say, well, yeah, you could choose not to be an American. You could immigrate to Canada or Germany or wherever, live there for enough time, go through all the hoops you have to jump through, and you could become a naturalized German citizen, a Canadian citizen, a French citizen, wherever, right? That's not quite what Heidegger means, right? If I move to Canada and become Canadian, I am still a person who was once an American. I am an American in a sense that someone who was born in Canada and is just naturally a Canadian citizen isn't, right? The fact I was born in America, raised here, whether I like it or not, is a fact about me. I cannot choose it, right? And Heidegger would say, to pretend that you can or can't choose these facts, you have control over them, is itself a form of self-deception. But nonetheless, I can choose what it means for me to be an American. I can be proud of it. I can have mixed feelings about it. I can be completely indifferent to being an American. I can just say, I don't care. If I wanted to change my citizenship to Canadian or German, I might decide, well, I hate being an American. I want to be something else, right? But even if that's your reaction, you are, in a very real sense, determined by the fact you are an American in a way that someone who's not an American isn't, right? It will always mean something to you, whether you admit that or not. The question is, what do you decide it means? For Heidegger, that's what authenticity is, not this radical complete freedom, but being clear-eyed about what is a result of just things outside of your control, but also the options for free choice and responsibility that you still have, and taking that responsibility. It's just a fiction to pretend our freedom is unlimited in the way that Sartre often does, but our freedom can still be limited and can still be determined by wider social factors and facts about our own biography, and still be a very real thing. Final point here, I know this is a lot. There's a lot to be said about existentialism. You could do a whole class on this. Sartre uses the term existentialism. Heidegger and the other thinkers that Sartre groups in with the existentialist group and himself, most of them say, I'm not an existentialist. We're not a party, Sartre. We're not a movement. But there do seem to be affinities among these thinkers, right? And I think they would all agree, whether Heidegger or Sartre or these other thinkers like Kierkegaard that, Sartre talks about, they would all say from the first person perspective, choice is unavoidable. Sartre might overstate that case, he might make it too radical, but from the first person perspective, there are elements of your life you cannot avoid choice about.